November 19th, 1688, Salisbury, England. History tells us that it was here that James, the unpopular Catholic king of England, Scotland, and Ireland, lost his throne. English conspirators had invited the Dutch Protestant William of Orange to take the crown, and James had raised an army to stop William in his tracks. James thought that fighting alongside the rank and file would give a critical morale boost, but when he met his army on the Salisbury Plain, he found that his men had defected to William in embarrassing numbers. The king, despondent, began to bleed from the nose, then fled to London. That was the opposite of a morale boost, by the way. In fact, it marked the end of James's efforts to save his reign. But what if I told you that nothing that James, or William, or their soldiers did that day actually really mattered? Because another man held the fate of the country in his hands alone, who was the King of Fairyland. Wait, hold on. Duncan, what the... A quick reminder while I go through my notes here on where this episode is heading. You can actually watch the first episode of our next series covering the 9,500-year history of cats right now 2 whole weeks earlier than anywhere else over on Nebula. If you ever find yourself in London and have a few weeks to kill, you should definitely do yourself a favor and go to the British Library to read the unpublished 500,000-word memoir of Goodwin Wharton, who reigned as King of the Fairies from 1684 to his death in 1704. The tome being the only way we know about this man's fascinating secret double life. Now, Goodwin Wharton was a real human being, not a fairy, making his ultimate accomplishment kind of that much more impressive. And he wasn't some Nepo king either, born to the throne. No, he was simply a youngest son of a powerful English landowner and parliamentarian, Philip Wharton, himself descended from a distinguished line of barons and knights. But as the youngest child, Goodwin was not his father's choice to carry on the family's political projects. That honor would go to Thomas, Goodwin's eldest brother. Thomas was a Whig member of Parliament and stood against the Pope fighting for a Protestant England. He was also deeply engaged in a scheme to prevent the Catholic James, then the Duke of York, from ever becoming king, and Goodwin tried to help out too. In 1680, at age 27, Goodwin was also elected to Parliament. In a wild opening speech, he attacked James as a stupid coward and implicated him in fantastic crimes like sinking English ships and starting the Great Fire of London, which, as you can imagine, kinda damaged the family brand. See, Thomas and Philip's intrigues were generally more subtle. Goodwin's approach was over the top and dangerously counterproductive to the cause, really solidifying to his dad why Thomas was the heir and Goodwin was the spare. But maybe, Goodwin thought, the problem was that he was too focused on trying to do the things that his family had already done, like trying to pursue his father's career or attempting to sleep with his brother's wife. Why wasn't he his own man? He should be out there making his own mark on the world and sleeping with some other guy's wife. So Goodwin resolved to stand on his own 2 feet, to be more Goodwin than Wharton. First, he tried his hand at inventing, but his version of a fire engine was killed in a patent dispute. Then a line of deep-sea diving equipment failed to pay for itself when Goodwin was unable to salvage a Spanish treasure galleon off the coast of Scotland. Note that this was pretty early in the history of deep-sea diving, and decompression sickness was not yet fully understood. Just a little factoid to put a pin in for now. Next, Goodwin turned to alchemy for a time, even contracting a professional alchemist and underwriting his work with a syndicate of investors. But the professional failed to deliver gold from molten metal, and in a tidy metaphor for Goodwin's overall entrepreneurial career, the alchemist burned down Goodwin's house and fled the country. His father was pretty unimpressed by all of this, but things were about to turn around. For in 1683, Goodwin met Mary Parish. 20 years Goodwin's senior, Mary was a healer and occultist who shared Goodwin's interest in the fantastic. Her help was initially recommended to him for a project of his, a method for communicating with angels. They didn't get too far with that, but Mary did reveal to him that when she was a little girl, her grandfather told her that he had once discovered fairy gold while digging in the woods. Then a year or 2 later, Mary saw the fairies dancing in the same woods. But any further adventures into the supernatural were waylaid in the following decades by bad marriages, bad luck, a stint in debtor's prison, and a drinking problem. Recently, however, Mary had been out walking on Hounslow Heath and followed the sound of church bells into the earth itself, where she had discovered the kingdom of the fairy folk and entered the confidence of their king and queen. She had learned that this magical race lived thousands of years, had invented shrinking and invisibility technology, and were absolutely loaded with gold. Hearing this, Goodwin thought that Mary possessed great magical gifts, but had just, never been able to properly use them before because of all of the hard work of being a woman in the world. Perhaps, Goodwin thought, with the guidance of a steady male hand, both of them would profit tremendously. Mary agreed, and they partnered up. She'd lend Goodwin her arcane talents, and he would put her up in a house and pay all her bills. Turns out, Goodwin's father wasn't that into this either. Ooh, but you know who was? The Queen of the Fairies. Yeah, according to Mary, she had told the Queen about Goodwin, and the Queen wanted to meet him, just to see where things went. As a heads up, though, Mary did have to let Goodwin know that the Queen, like all fairies, was Catholic. But for a Whig and a Protestant, that really was one of the most transgressive thrills one could imagine. Mary then tried to arrange said meeting between Goodwin and the Fairy Queen, but the Queen was forced to cancel no less than 4 times, once because Mary said she was on her period. On another occasion, though, the King of the Fairies drank too much and later died, after which the kingdom of course went into mourning and no visitors could possibly be admitted. But Goodwin didn't let the royal's flakiness get in the way of his business speculation. For while the fairies were putting him off, he and Mary made expeditions into the woods where her grandfather had first discovered the fairy gold. Because there was sure to be more buried treasure. And the treasure was there all right. But now, guarded by 3 vicious, horrible, invisible demons. Goodwin and Mary battled these devils, ultimately exorcising them to the deepest hell. Then a good spirit appeared to say well done, and the treasure was theirs for the taking, but it was also, really big, and would need to be carried out by a team of fairy servants, who of course would have to be paid in real money to do so, obviously. Goodwin paid it to Mary. Then the good spirit announced that the treasure had suddenly disappeared, though it had definitely been there before. Happens all the time, the spirit said. And this whole scene, of course, had to be communicated to Goodwin by Mary. And yes, I am just now realizing that somehow while telling this story, I wandered onto the extra mythology set. And you all may be asking, did Goodwin actually believe all of this? Heck, did Mary believe it? Well, for Goodwin's part, he did have his doubts. The fairies' consistent excuses did stretch credulity. But if it were true, the potential rewards were enormous. Ooh, and then Mary said that the newly bereaved queen had fallen in love with Goodwin and wanted to make him the new king of the fairies. She had also said that the queen was already pregnant by Goodwin through nighttime liaisons that he didn't remember. And although a wedding officiated by the fairy pope was canceled at the last minute because, again, the queen's period or something, Mary told him that the queen did officially pronounce Goodwin king. Also, turns out the queen was an understanding partner, because Goodwin had also begun a romantic and physical relationship with Mary. She had even bore Goodwin some children. A lot, turns out, because every single time Mary slept with Goodwin, she'd tell him the next morning that she was pregnant. Though Goodwin only ever laid eyes on 2 of the 40 or so children Mary said she bore him, he actually was an attentive father when it came to child support. Okay, so if we take all of this into account, I think we do have a clear answer as to whether Goodwin believed in the fairy stuff. Yes, he did. And some have posited that possible brain damage from all of the deep-sea diving with experimental equipment might have had something to do with it. Poor guy, really. So while in 1685, James, Duke of York, ascended the throne of England, Ireland, and Scotland, despite the best efforts of the Whigs and the Whartons, Goodwin was busy seeing angels in glasses of water that Mary had said she made appear. And though they spoke, they only spoke to her. "Cool beans, huh?" said Mary. Goodwin at this point was envious. Imagine if the angels talked to him. And just as if wishing made it so, one day they did. In his London home, no Mary in sight, the angels spoke to Goodwin loud and clear. "Hey, my dude, don't worry that you failed to stop a Catholic from taking the throne or that you are still best known for personally viciously defaming that Catholic on the floor of Parliament. Because you, my guy, you are gonna be king one day. Not your dad, not your bro. You, the greatest king that ever lived, second only to Christ." Now that was cool beans. Goodwin had a direct line now, not only to the angels, but after a time, to God himself, who said that if Goodwin kept faith, he'd succeed beyond his wildest dreams. And Goodwin was confident that God wouldn't be screwing him around like these new agey fairies did. So, as Goodwin strengthened his own personal connection to God, his spiritual dependence on Mary was reduced. He was content to leave her and his fairy wife to their own adventures. Then, alone, he was consumed with dark and disturbing visions of death and fire, Christ and Satan. He was, as God ordained him, the solar king of the world now. And for a king, treasure hunting was small potatoes. God wanted him to be involved in national affairs. Now, around this time, King James and Queen Mary did not yet have a male heir. Not good news for James's succession. And it was here that God revealed to Goodwin an opportunity. See, the reason God said James could not sire a boy upon the queen was because that was Goodwin's destiny. What's more, the queen actually loved Goodwin, and even James was a little into this idea. Again, so God told Goodwin. The child would be the next king, and in Goodwin's wisdom, a Protestant. So, Goodwin made an appointment with Mary through one of the queen's personal assistants from the spirit realm. Every queen has one, I assume, which mysteriously she failed to keep. That spirit then advised Goodwin that the almost cuckolded James had actually challenged him to a duel over this business, but James didn't show up for this either, really cementing Goodwin's initial impressions of the king as a coward. You can see the strings on the corkboard coming together here. Not long after, James and Mary did produce a male heir, which, ironically, was actually pretty bad news for James, as it signaled the beginning of a possible dynasty of Catholic kings, and that was threat enough to put the king's enemies into motion. William of Orange's challenge to the throne was broadly welcomed, and James lost his luster when he fled from Salisbury. But the king had not yet made his fatal mistake. See, Goodwin generously reached out to James with an offer to save him, betraying his Whiggish principles in a real demonstration of solidarity between the monarchs of England and Fairyland. But James didn't even respond. In Goodwin's mind, that was it. Doomed by his own pride, James had lost his last and best chance to keep his crown. So, the winds had changed, and a Protestant was back on the throne. For his part in it, Thomas Wharton was appointed to the Privy Council and the royal household. As for Goodwin, as far as the world knew, he had been up to practically nothing for the last decade. But it didn't matter. He was a Whig and a Wharton. Therefore, why wouldn't he be rewarded too, right? Goodwin returned to Parliament and was made a lieutenant colonel of the cavalry and a Lord Commissioner of the Admiralty, all while keeping, despite the potential conflicts of interest, his position as Solar King of the World and King of the Fairies. It's important to note that nobody in government knew about that side of Goodwin's life. Now, it might have come up in a background check, but they didn't really have those things then. Of course, in the modern day, someone with such an extreme and delusional view would never be appointed to high-ranking positions in government, right? Not gonna happen. So we can really rest easy on that one. Virtually overnight, though, Goodwin had come into everything he'd ever wanted: respect, wealth, and power. He commanded both the English Navy and the shock troops of the Fairy Kingdom and returned to his deep-sea treasure hunts with those armadas at his back. He even had an eye on the throne. The angels once told him that King William's daughter, Prince Anne, was in love with him, although she never gave much sign of it. And Goodwin never once thought that if God really did have a plan for him, it must have been this: that he would ultimately triumph. But in doing so, it would be plain to see how little he had done to earn it. That he might fashion himself however he liked, but in the end, to everyone else, he was no more than a Nepo baby. Now, with Goodwin's fantastical story all wrapped up, I wanted to tell you quickly about two upcoming extra history series that I am just really excited about. First up, next week, we are releasing our Extra History Complete on the 30 Years' War, one of my absolute favorite series we've done, remastered with updates from our Lies episode, and I'm just pumped you get to see it. The story just flows so much better as one nice, long, big episode. That airs 1 week from now on March 15th, I believe. And then after that, a series I've been wanting to win the patron vote since I, took this gig. We are going to be diving paws first into our new series on the history of cats, where Zoe, Rob, and I take you through the 9,500 year history of our feline friends since they first became domesticated, and it is one epic tale if you'll pardon the pun. Episode 1 of that drops in 2 weeks, I believe, on March 22nd. But if you want to see those amazing episodes like right this very moment, they are both live over on our streaming service, Nebula. That is because with their support, every episode of Extra History goes up on Nebula before anywhere else, all ad-free. Which also makes Nebula kind of the perfect place to catch up on our over 400 episodes in our back catalog without any ads like this one. Not to mention the tens of thousands of videos from Nebula's other 200 plus creators who are also posting videos early over there all the time. Oh, and did I mention that a month of Nebula costs less than a cup of coffee? Because with our code, it most certainly does. And with that, you'll even get access to Nebula's bigger budget original projects that you can't see anywhere else. And I'm talking like big, legit prestige stuff here. Like Real Life Lore's ongoing series, War Room, that takes a deep dive into our current conflicts that are affecting our modern world, or Valentina V's new director's commentary on the Nebula film Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend, where she's joined by producer Dave Wiskus and writer/star of the film Abigail Thorne, or the brand new bi-weekly comedy series from the Jetlag crew called Abolish Everything, where comedian abolitionists roast a pet peeve they've wanted banned from society. It is filmed before a live audience in NYC. I was there for the first taping, and it is absolutely hilarious. But guess what, Extra Historians? It does get better, cause ya boy here is actually taking to the abolitionist stage and filming a rant of my own at the end of the month, and I cannot wait for you to see what I want to get gone. Now, getting all of this on Nebula is a steal at just $5 a month or $60 a year, but when you use our code nebula.tv/extrahistory, 2 really cool things happen. First, the price drops to just $3 a month with an annual plan, and second, you'll be helping to support our ability to continue telling historical tales, because as creators, we do see a cut of every subscription for the life of that subscription. Actually, on that note, you can even get lifetime memberships for $300 to lock in all of that goodness forever. Seriously, you just pay once and then enjoy Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. Though again, please be sure to scan our code here or click the link in the description so you get the discount and you'll be supporting our channel, which we thank you for very much. So come see the difference Nebula makes right here, or you can stay on the YouTube machine and check out our next video here, but that one will have ads though. How to accurately describe Zeliad's Architectures, Lotus Wolf, Kuya Koi, Joseph Blame, Hunter C, Dominic Valenciana, Arclight Games, and Angelo Valenciana being the best legendary patrons? I don't know, but they are!